if you're a big horror fan, chances are you're also a pretty big fan of the Scream franchise. I know I'm an absolute gigantic, mega, super crazy, psychotic fan of the franchise. So now that we have six films in the franchise, I figured why not rank them? Wasn't exactly planning on making this video this soon, but I also figured why not? Why don't I take a stab at it? So I'm pretty much just gonna go from worst to best. The list is gonna progress from the movie I like least, then I'm gonna work my way over to the movie I like best. There's only six films in this entire franchise, so this shouldn't be too difficult. My stomach just growled. Coming in at number 6, Scream 3. Now, this is actually a really fun movie for me. I have a lot of fun watching this movie. The idea of the characters going to Hollywood is actually pretty interesting. Him visiting the set of Stab, kind of seeing a first-hand look at the movie within the movie. I thought that was really interesting and actually a lot of fun to explore. The one and only reason I would place this movie last is because the movie itself didn't really have a true shock factor for me. There was nothing in this movie that necessarily shocked me the first time I saw it. Nothing really surprised me about it either. And even though the killer reveals were decent and interesting enough, they were still a bit predictable for me. Also, none of the kills were really that interesting to me, and none of the deaths really hit hard for me. But like I said, this is still a film I can absolutely enjoy and appreciate for what it is. Coming in at number 5, Scream 2. Now, Scream 2 I like just a tad bit more than Scream 3. In most senses, I actually like 2 and 3 almost equally. But Scream 2 did just a couple things a little better than Scream 3 in my opinion. The setting, being in college, that just made a lot more sense to me than them going to Hollywood. But the college setting really doesn't feel out of place at all to me. Reason being is because in the first film, the primary characters are still in high school. So in this film, them being in college kind of makes sense. You know, that's a normal transition from high school to college. Also, I feel like the returning characters from the first movie just they carried that specific charm that they already had in the first film. They kind of carried it over to this movie and made it really enjoyable to watch. It's something that I loved about the first movie was the characters themselves. These characters were just really funny and charming and likable in every sense, and they carried that over to this movie. Every new character introduced in this movie are pretty likable. There's one specific death in this movie that just shocked me the very first time I watched this movie. It's a death that even to this day I can't get over. You know, it's a death from a really, popular character in this franchise, an absolute fan favorite. You know exactly which character I'm talking about. Coming in at number 4, Scream 5. Or Scream 2022. You know which one I'm talking about. When it was first announced that we were getting a fifth Scream film, I was partially excited for it, but at the same time, I really didn't feel like we needed a new Scream film. And I guess it was because we hadn't really gotten a Scream film in such a long time. To be honest, I wasn't exactly crazy about the TV series that they did on Scream, even though I don't hate it, but definitely don't love it. I just kind of felt like the franchise could have been put to rest at this point, especially after the passing of the late and great Wes Craven. I guess I just didn't want to see a Scream film not directed by Wes, if that makes sense. But then Scream 5 gets made and gets released. I remember leaving the theaters completely glad that we got it. Confession. The one and only reason I even wanted to see this movie initially was because of Jenna Ortega. I didn't really know much about Jenna Ortega until I saw the movie The Babysitter Killer Queen. I really loved the first film. Jenna Ortega was a new character in that second film, and she was incredible. Seeing that she was going to be in a Scream film, I was pretty intrigued and interested. Her being in the movie kind of gave me that initial reason to want to see the movie. And then, of course, later on, kind of dawned on me, this is a new film in the Scream franchise. franchise I love, so obviously I'm gonna give it a chance regardless who's in it. Now, I can't say Scream 5 is necessarily a groundbreaking film, but it's still really solid Scream film. That reminded me that there's still plenty of life left in this franchise. It kind of gave me that feeling that, maybe more films in the franchise might not be such a bad thing. It kind of left me wanting more, if I'm being honest. Coming in at number 3, Scream 4. Kind of crazy to think that Scream 3 and 5 are an entire 22 years apart. Because 3 and 4 and 4 and 5 were released 11 years apart. So the thought of getting a new Scream film after so long, while Scream 4 was about to be released, wasn't exactly ideal for me. I remember actually being pretty skeptical about Scream 4. This was around a time where I was still mourning the absolutely terrible Friday the 13th reboot and that questionable Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. Granted, I don't think those are the worst horror films ever made, but they just really let me down. I guess I was just scared that Scream 4 was gonna be anything like those movies. I was scared it was kind of gonna follow that formula. But then it releases, and similar to Scream 5 later on, I was actually really glad that we got it. Scream 4 turned out to be an incredible film and actually a pretty satisfying film. I guess that's why I ended up feeling like the franchise should have come to an end after that one. I felt that way for a long time because I was so satisfied by Scream 4. Like, I was good after that one. And I kind of feel like Scream 4 being so great kind of added some pressure when they were developing Scream 5. It kind of added that pressure to make sure like they did not screw this one up. Thank you, Scream 4. Now, coming in at number 2, Scream 6. I said in my review for this film that it's crazy to me that 27 years in existence, this franchise is still alive and well. It's still relevant and it's still incredible. That kind of blows my mind, but what blows my mind even more is just how incredible this movie actually is. It's gotten to the point where it's kind of hard for me to imagine where on earth this franchise could go next. What hasn't been explored in a Scream film that not only hasn't been explored yet, but could actually work in a Scream film? Yet this movie answers that question and gives us everything we didn't even know we wanted and more. Sheesh! Coming in at number 1, Scream from 1996. I know there hasn't really been anything articulate or crazy about these rankings, and I'm sure this entire thing has been pretty predictable. And honestly, I really didn't try to make it any other way. I can kind of guarantee that the second this video started, you probably knew which movie I was going to rank number 1. I'm sure about 99.9% of Scream fans, I'm sure we all share the same number 1 spot. But what can I say, man? This movie is perfect in so many ways for me, and it's so special to me. Because like a lot of horror fans out there, this was the very first horror film I ever watched as a kid. This movie changed my life, honestly. It really triggered and sparked that love for not just horror, but films in general. I really do think this was the first film that made me love movies. This movie really was a game changer. Still to this day, it's scary, it's funny, it's intriguing, it's entertaining, it's everything you could ever want from a solid horror film and more. There's nothing really like this movie, especially because it was released when there literally was nothing else like it. This movie really was ahead of its time, especially in the sense that it was like a step further from what all the other horror films were doing at the time. But it fit perfectly with the times because it was exactly what horror needed, and it was released exactly when horror needed it most. So, that's my ranking of the Scream franchise. A franchise I love, a really popular franchise. I do love the entire franchise. I love every film the same. Even the film that I ranked last, I still love just as much as almost all of them. I still really love it. This is a franchise that means a whole lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to a lot of people. I don't think that anyone necessarily needs to be a giant fan of this franchise to consider themselves a real horror fan, whatever that even is. If someone doesn't love this franchise at all, I still think that's okay. I don't think you necessarily need to love this franchise to consider yourself a real horror fan. I think that's ridiculous. I think this is all subjective. All of our opinions matter. I don't think there's a wrong opinion when it comes to this stuff. That's one of the great things about loving movies is that there's something for everyone out there in every genre, and you don't necessarily have to love everything, and that's okay. Just because something's popular doesn't mean you have to love it. I don't know. I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense at all, but that was my ranking of the Scream franchise. How would you rank the Scream franchise? Let me know down below. Please like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world. And I'll catch you on the next one.